If you're a writer, you're probably familiar with the constant struggle of failing to convey your heart and soul through words and screaming your creative aspirations into the void of an uncaring universe. Feelings like this are common enough to have colloquial terms within the writing community, and if you name something, you gain power over it. So let's take a look at some writer dilemmas and how to handle them. A common writerly affliction is imposter syndrome, the fear that you're not a real writer, that all your accomplishments were just luck, and that you'll eventually be exposed as a fraud and a failure. Imposter syndrome means never feeling good enough. Even famed American novelist John Steinbeck said, "I am not a writer. I've been fooling myself and other people." And poet Maya Angelou declared, "Each time I write a book, every time I face that yellow pad, the challenge is so great. I've written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody, and they're going to find me out." Self-doubt is normal and healthy. It's what ensures we don't see ourselves as creative geniuses who produce perfect drafts in need of 0 revisions. It's good to have humility and believe that your writing can always improve, but that feeling shouldn't be debilitating, and it shouldn't prevent you from celebrating your successes or from continuing to write. To combat imposter syndrome, give these 3 strategies a try. 1. Focus on the positives. Create a document of positive feedback or reviews you've received, and then print them out to display at your desk. Write a list of your writing strengths. Keep a record of your accomplishments, big and small. Perhaps you won a writing contest a few years ago, or today you wrote down an awesome idea for a new story. The key is to reassure yourself that you can do it, so don't be afraid to start small if you have to. Every bit helps. 2. Realize you're not alone. Bond with other writers over your shared struggles, from the anxiety of publishing stories for the world to read and judge, to times when you feel like everything you've ever written belongs in a dumpster fire. The Twitter writing community is an especially good place for this sort of commiseration, but you can find writing groups on Facebook and Reddit, as well as writing-specific forums like NaNoWriMo, Absolute Write Water Cooler, and Critique Circle, or even out in the wild and real-world writing meetups. 3. Create for the sake of creating. Write something just as a gift for yourself, without caring what other people will think, or worrying if the idea will sell. Maybe you know vampires or zombies are passé, but you still think it sounds fun to write about them. Maybe you know your literary noir comedy mashup isn't very marketable, but you love writing the characters' witty banter. Create other things too: food, gardens, art, music, games, reviews, blog posts, videos. Cultivate a holistic sense of self, where your worth doesn't feel tied to only your writing. And please don't give up or call yourself a failure just because you haven't gotten published or won awards or written as much as you'd like to. You're a writer, someone who writes, but you're not your writing. Writing is the product, not the person. And whether or not you or anyone else feels good about your writing doesn't say anything about your worth as a person. Even if you've never experienced imposter syndrome, you might have days when your creative muse is absent and you feel uninspired to create. A muse is any external or internal source that grants you a wellspring of inspiration. In Greek mythology, the 9 muses of the arts and sciences were the daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, the Titan goddess of memory. The story goes that Homer found inspiration in Calliope, the goddess of eloquence and epic poetry, when writing the Iliad and the Odyssey. Your own muse could be an actual person, a creative soulmate like Beatrice was for Dante as his childhood love. He wrote her as one of his guides who leads him through Paradiso and the Divine Comedy. A professor once told me, "Write for one reader," and from then on, I decided my muse would be my younger self, and I would write stories she would most enjoy. Your muse could simply be a personified force. A story idea might hit you as a shower thought, or a song could transport you to a magical alternate reality. But what about the other days, when your well of creativity feels dried up, and your muse won't speak to you? Chatting to someone else about your work in progress, or establishing a writing routine, can coax your muse out of her hiding place. However, as Stephen King says in On Writing, don't wait for the muse. As I've said, he's a hard-headed guy who's not susceptible to a lot of creative fluttering. This isn't the Ouija board or the spirit world we're talking about here, but just another job, like laying pipe or driving long-haul trucks. Your job is to make sure the Muse knows where you're going to be every day, from 9 till noon or 7 till 3. If he does know, I assure you that sooner or later, he'll start showing up, chomping his cigar, and making his magic. Speaking of which, Stephen King's On Writing is probably the most cited and recommended books on the writing craft, and doubles as a memoir for King's journey to becoming a published author. It's definitely worth a read. To summon your personal muse, surround yourself with things that inspire you. Read an entertaining book, watch a thought-provoking movie, travel to some beautiful landscapes. Above all, sit down and write one sentence, then another and another. Internalize the mantra of author Isabel Allende. Show up, show up, show up, and after a while the muse shows up too. If she doesn't show up invited, eventually she just shows up. Say you have succeeded in putting your butt in the chair, but it might be difficult to stay seated and focused because life is full of distractions. You might engage in productive procrastination, where you tell yourself, I'm going to write, but then decide you need to first clean your entire home and answer all your emails before you can do anything else. So 2 hours go by, and only 10 minutes of that was spent actually writing. This often results in writer's guilt, wherein you despise yourself for doing anything other than writing. Still, productive procrastination is way better than normal procrastination. For instance, I used to have so much on my want-to-do list that I'd get overwhelmed and wander over to Imgur and read memes for hours and then hate myself for all that lost time afterward. I put all this pressure on myself to be productive every second of the day, and somehow that made me even less productive. It felt impossible to concentrate on my writing or editing for more than 10 minutes at a time. What I started doing instead was give myself easy outs that still felt somewhat useful for my personal growth. Between writing sessions, I'd tell myself, well, if you're not going to write, you should read a book or take a walk. At least that's better than scrolling through cat photos. You can post on social media to build your writing brand, watch a video about a topic you want to research for a story, organize your notes or files, look for writing contests and publications. Just make sure you set a timer to prevent yourself from procrastinating for too long. I feel a lot better about myself when I can look back on the day and see I've made progress toward my goals, even if it's just baby steps. The problem of procrastination is really about struggling to enter a flow state, that feeling of being immersed in your story world, when a waterfall of words spills from your brain onto the page. Positive psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi defines flow as being completely involved in an activity for its own sake. The ego falls away, time flies. Every action, movement, and thought follows inevitably from the previous one, like playing jazz. Your whole being is involved, and you're using your skills to the utmost. To enter a flow state, try having a specific goal or plan of action, like an outline or a clear mental image of the scene you want to write. Usually, getting in the zone happens when there's a slight level of challenge, and the task requires stretching your current skill level a little. You want that challenge skill balance, rather than writing something that's too easy or too hard. For me, this sometimes means brainstorming answers to important narrative questions like, how can I make things worse for the protagonist in this next scene? Or, how can I cover this plot hole? But even in a flow state, you could still hit a snag, stumble, and splat headlong into writer's block, the dreaded paralysis of not being able to write a single word. Or maybe every sentence is utter agony to produce, like yanking out toenails. Whether or not you believe writer's block exists, it's a good catch-all term for the times when your writing just isn't flowing. Orson Scott Card has a personal theory on this annoying condition. Writer's block is my unconscious mind telling me that something I've just written is either unbelievable or unimportant to me, and I solve it by going back and reinventing some part of what I've already written, so that when I write it again, it is believable and interesting to me. I have a whole video with 17 tips for conquering writer's block, but my favorite strategies are to have someone critique the story I'm struggling with, write summaries of what happens next, and then just some writing advice. Absent muses, productive procrastination, and writer's block prove that writers have problems with focus, but that's just, ooh, look, it's shiny new idea syndrome. Forget that space opera trilogy I started last week. Now I'm going to write a gothic romance set in the 19th century. So I'd better check out a bunch of books at the library for research. Or maybe I'll write a quirky comedy screenplay, and I can watch a bunch of Wes Anderson movies as research. Or, well, now I've got a lot of decomposing story corpses in my closet, and not a single one left alive and whole. Novel-length projects are often abandoned around the 10,000 word mark, when the adrenaline rush and novelty of new love has worn off, and you're itching to feel that high again with a new partner. This one for sure feels like it's the one, the story that will make you a household name. But once you get to know each other a little better, you start seeing the flaws, the cracks, and it would take so much effort to work through those problems. Better to dump it for this younger, more attractive story. Instead of chasing each shiny new idea, brain dump the idea into a different document, slap on a working title, and shove it into a special folder you won't lose because you've got it all organized. Then crawl back to your unfinished lover. Why are you abandoning her during her time of need? Show some self-control, soldier, and get back to work. New ideas are beautiful to have, and if you really love them as much as you think you do, you'll be able to wait until you're ready to pursue them without distraction. Okay, so now I'm devoted to one novel. I've drawn a map of the major cities and riverways of Spitalvat, and I've pinned down the etymology for all the terms in the magic system. Ha! Suck it, shiny new idea syndrome! I'm writing an awesome fantasy world, and I'm going to make sure the reader knows every single exquisite detail. Wait, shit, now I've contracted something worse. Worldbuilder's disease. There's paragraph after paragraph describing the wares sold at the market, the intricate class system depicted through various articles of clothing, the religious and political systems of every species. All this painstaking effort is put into delivering information rather than making readers care about the characters or, the plot. This can happen with realistic fiction as well, if you fall knee-deep into researching what New Orleans was like in the 1920s, or you travel 20 branches back in your main character's family tree. The cure for Worldbuilder's disease is to ignore the minutiae and focus on storytelling. Who are your characters, and what makes them interesting? How are their actions driving the plot? What larger world-building elements create conflict relevant to your characters? Sometimes dedicating a lot of time to world-building pays off. J.R.R. Tolkien spent decades planning out Middle-earth, and Frank Herbert spent at least 5 years researching and writing Dune. Ultimately, though, they framed all that knowledge around captivating characters with clear goals. In The Lord of the Rings, a hobbit named Frodo sets out on a journey to destroy the One Ring and save his home from Sauron, the Dark Lord. Dune has Paul Atreides, the son of a duke, taking control of the desert planet Arrakis. In both of these stories, the world is integral to the central conflict. Without the One Ring, there is no plot. Without the desert planet, there is no plot. The same goes for novels set in a particular place or historical period, like The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett, which a reviewer described as a 1,000-page book about the building of a cathedral 1,000 years ago in England. Naturally, the novel involves architectural knowledge, but the praise focuses on Follett's cast of compelling characters. To avoid including too much information about your world, write characters that people care about, and build the universe around them. Connect those unique world-building components to the character's goals, and you will have a more memorable story. Self-doubt, distraction, and fatigue are natural side effects of trying to create something from nothing. Oftentimes, we're our own worst enemies, and that's how these common problems arise. But if you know yourself well enough, you can harness the power of your own creativity. Take a hard look in the mirror, and be kind to the person looking back at you. What writer problem do you struggle with most? Feel free to vent in the comments. Whatever you do, keep writing.